Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Shri Chaitanya Prasadena Tadrupasya Vinirnayam Balopi Krute Shastram Dristva Vraja Vilasinahi Om Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Shri Ganesha Sharada Guru Bhyo Namaha Hari Om. Welcome, dear devotees. So nice to have you with us for our Saturday Vaishnavism classes, where we are currently in the midst, right in the thick of the Bhagavad Gita. We're at chapter 10, this famous text, in translation and commentary by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, one of the foremost commentators on the Gita, I would say, in our modern age. Certainly one of the most popular translations available in this Finazi volume. BBT is not paying me for this advertisement, but if you're watching. All right. So we are moving decidedly into this middle section of the text, into this second section of the text, which is devoted, so say the commentators, to describing the sentiments behind Bhakti Yoga. So Arjuna has come to this dilemma in this battle. He has inquired for Krishna and says, Krishna says, he tells him two things. He tells the soul is eternal, right? And so you must work without attachment. And Arjuna says, do I need to, meditate and pay attention to the soul, or do I have to work without attachment? Both, Krishna says. He says, how do I do both? And he says, well, your answer is dhyana, which is, he talks about meditation. Talks about how to close your eyes, go to a meditative spot to visualize God within the heart, describing this type of yogic practice. So Arjuna says, I thought you said you weren't telling me to be an ascetic, Krishna. And Krishna says, I'm not, right? What you need to do is you need to meditate on God everywhere as you go about your deeds. And so Arjuna says, how do I do this, essentially? And so Krishna starts explaining what does it mean to say that God pervades everything? What does it mean to say that the Lord has entered into this universe and has pervaded and united himself with every living thing? I am reading right now that book by Richard Rohr. Some of you may know him, a Franciscan priest, spiritual teacher. He talks about the incarnation. The first incarnation of the Christ was not the physical incarnation of Jesus, but it was the creation of the world. Right? This, what does it mean that the world is the body of God? This type of concept is central to the Gita and central to the Bhagavad. So we'll start with this first verse. We have a Sri Bhagavan Vacha, so Krishna is continuing, speaking from last time. Puya eva mahabaho shrinnume paramam vacha yatte ham priyamanaya vakshyami hitatam yaya. Supreme Personality of Godhead said, listen again, O mighty armed Arjuna. Because you are my dear friend, for your benefit, I shall speak to you further, giving knowledge that is better than what I have already explained. So Krishna says this several times to Arjuna in the Gita. He refers to him explicitly, because you are my friend, because you are beloved of me. This reminds me of something that Thakur says, Sri Ramakrishna says, he's talking about God as this rich person, and you can see God and you can see all the different aspects of God as like walking around in the rich person's garden and seeing all the flowers and seeing the beautiful groundskeeping and the fountains and the pillars and everything. This is like having this kind of impersonal Brahman realization, You realize the opulence of God, the aishvarya of God. This is what's going to be described. His aishvarya, literally his majesty, um, displayed as the material creation. But what the relationship between that Krishna is describing with Arjuna is different, because it is this more kind of intimate friendship. So you can stroll around the rich man's garden, or you can make friends with the rich man himself, and he can tell you all about the garden if you want to know, right? And so acquire love of God before everything is the message of Thakur, and this is the message given in the Gita, that the basis for this information to be revealed is this relationship of Sakya Rasa, this friendship that Krishna has with Arjuna, this trust that Krishna is giving to Arjuna, saying, okay, this is the man through which I am going to. He could have revealed it through Uddhava. You know, in the 11th canto of the Bhagavatam, Krishna speaks to Uddhava. Krishna speaks to many people. Rama speaks to many people. Rishi Vaishishta Rama could have given the Bhagavad Gita in Treta Yuga, right? Why this time? Why right now? Krishna gives the reason. It's because of this special relationship that he's cultivated with Arjuna. Over this series, you can go back in the playlist and re-listen to the Mahabharata about Krishna and Arjuna, and about their relationship, and when we get into the Bhagavatam, we're especially when we study this first canto, that's where we're going, of course, as you know, after the Gita, as we go into the Bhagavatam. We're going to have a sort of recap of the Battle of Kurukshetra, but through the lens of bhakti, through the lens of devotion. And a lot of things about this whole Kurukshetra situation become clear when you see it through this devotional lens. Krishna continues, neither the hosts of demigods nor the great sages know my origin or opulences, for in every respect I am the source of the demigods and the sages. He who knows me as the unborn, the beginningless, as the supreme lord of all worlds, he only, undiluted among men, is free from sin. Yomam ajam anadim cha. Ajam anadim, I am unborn and I am without beginning. Viti loka maheshwaram, I am the supreme maheshwaram, like Shiva, we call him Maheshwara. He is the deity in all worlds. And so he is the master of all worlds. Asamudhaha, one is literally, we've seen mudha. Mudha means like foolish. Mudha means deluded. One who is not deluded. Sarva pape pramuchyate, he is delivered from all sinful reactions. This is in a sutra form the message of this whole central chapter of the Gita, the central section of these 6 chapters, from chapter 6 to chapter 12, all about bhakti yoga. The way to, and you know, notice Krishna doesn't say he who has practiced all these spiritual practices, right, is free from sin. He who is born in a Brahmana family, right, is free from sin. Krishna does not say he who, you know, accepts Krishna as, you know, their personal Lord and Savior above all other deities, right? That's not in the text. What Krishna is trying to say is you are free from sin when you know that God is everywhere and you see God everywhere. This is the basis of our liberation. This is how we, you know, Nish talks about this a lot, that the material world, what we know as this Maya, this material world, is all in our heads, right? We're seeing divine reality, right? We're seeing the one divine reality permeate about everything. We're Advaitins, right? A lot of us in this server, we believe that the divine reality is all encompassing, and yet we don't see it, right? Krishna is saying how to see it. Is unborn and beginningless as supreme lord of all worlds. It's interesting. This we talked about this in chapter 2, I believe, where there's that verse where Krishna says, never there was a time that I did not exist, nor you did not exist, nor anyone else did not exist. Which posits, a problem for Western, people coming to this, because it's like, how can you have the supreme being existing and the soul is existing? The soul is also uncreated, right? We don't really have a God. We don't really have a creator God in the picture giving us the Gita and the Bhagavatam, rather a God who has expanded his own energies in order to create. So we're seeing on all levels this divine reality, but on different gradations, as we see in forces 4 to 5: intelligence, knowledge, freedom from doubt and delusion, forgiveness, truthfulness, control of the senses, control of the mind, happiness, and distress, birth, death, fear, fearlessness, nonviolence, equanimity, satisfaction, austerity, charity, fame, and infamy. All these various qualities of living beings are created by me alone. So Krishna is all of these things, right? And I see someone was laughing in the chat. It's kind of funny, when we see this is Krishna this kind of schizophrenic figure? I shouldn't have used that term. It's not correct. Usage of the mental illness, but like a divided, psyche of like, is it like the there's this Roman god that's like two faces, and like one face is good and one face is. I think this isn't the original interpretation of it, but Christians have straw man this idea of like God is like there's a good side and there's a bad side, right? And this is what God is not, because God is all transcendent and all like according to all traditions, right? And yes, God is beyond all of these things, good and bad, as we think of them, right? But our vision of good and bad, of fame and infamy, of all of these things is very limited. We can only see what our conditioning allows us to see. Our level of freedom of conditioning allows us to see. So in happiness, there might be distress. In distress, there might be happiness. It's all one thing, right? All part of one thing in the beginning. It's just how we choose to see it. Is the defining factor sometimes. The Saptarishis, the 7 great sages, and before them, 4 other great sages, and the Manus, the progenitors of mankind, come from me, born from my mind, and all the living beings populating the various planets are descended from them. So these are the progenitors of the Vedic world. We talked about the Manus in our introduction to the Puranic world lecture. All of these, the Saptarishis, these 7 sages that are meditating in the sky. There's a great story that Thakur tells of a vision that he had about Swami Vivekananda, where this famous story where Thakur saw this huge, the cosmic sky, all the way up beyond Brahmaloka to where the Saptarishis are, to Siddhaloka, right, where all the yogis go, all the people who have achieved realization through ascetic practice, they go there. And it's headed by these 7 rishis who are just in the expanse of Brahma, just meditating, just these long beards, like, dreadlocks, the whole thing. And up into their midst crawls this little child, this little blue boy. I wonder who that little blue boy could be. And he tugs on one of their beards and he makes a motion like, I'm going down, you follow. And of course, according to tradition, right, our tradition, right, the little boy was of course Sri Ramakrishna, and the sage was Swami Vivekananda. How appropriate, right? We canonically, Vivekananda is an incarnation of one of the Saptarishis, these 7 sages, including the 4 child sages, Sanaka, Sananda, and Sanatan and Sanat Kumar, that we read about in the Bhagavatam. We read about them in our Narasingha Kalila class. And so all of these big names, in the Vedic pantheon of Narada and Vyasa and Prajapati and Brahma, and even Shiva in the Vaishnava tradition, right? Because Shiva is a devotee of Krishna. In not necessarily according to the Gita text itself, but certainly according to Prabhupada's tradition, this Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, there's a specific position for Lord Shiva. And it's not in like a degrading position. Like they're not bad Lord Shiva. Like they revere Lord Shiva. Vaishnavas love Lord Shiva, but they just have a slightly different conception of his cosmological role in the whole Vedic system. So all of these are coming from the Lord, Krishna says. One who is factually convinced of this opulence and mystic power of mine engages in unalloyed devotional service. Let's get the Sanskrit here. Etam vibhutim yogam cha. Vibhutim. Vibhu is related to many words meaning all pervading, right? This chapter is also sometimes called Vibhuti Yoga, the yoga of this all pervading Lord. In Shaivite's temple, sometimes we see the Vibhuti, this ash that's referred to, that's representative of the infinite, this ash from the sacred fire that is rubbed on our heads. One who is factually convinced. Tattvataha. Tattva means truth. Tattva means truth, it means reality. Right? Like when it talks about the 62 tattvas of Kashmir Shaivism, we're talking about different levels of reality. We say Vishnu Tattva, like, Shiva Tattva, Guru Tattva, Jiva Tattva, that's us, right? The material and spiritual universe is envisioned and analyzed in these categories in the Shastra as tattva, right? This is our way of grasping this infinite principle. Avikalpena, without division. This person of mine engages in undeviated devotional service. Prabhupada says in the purport, the highest summit of spiritual perfection is knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Unless one is firmly convinced of the different opulences of the Supreme Lord, he cannot engage in devotional service. Generally, people know that God is great, but they do not know in detail how God is great. Here are the details. If one knows factually how God is great, then naturally he becomes a surrendered soul and engages himself in the devotional service of the Lord. When one factually knows the opulences of the Supreme, there is no alternative but to surrender to him. This factual knowledge can be known from the description in Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and similar literatures. In the administration of this universe, there are many demigods distributed throughout the planetary systems. The chief of them are Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, the four great Kumars, and the other patriarchs. There are many forefathers of the population of the universe, and all of them are born of the Supreme Lord Krishna. The Supreme Lord Krishna is the original forefather of all the forefathers. These are some of the opulence of the Supreme Lord. When one is firmly convinced of them, he accepts Krishna with great faith and without any doubt, and he engages in devotional service. All this particular knowledge is required in order to increase one's interest in the loving devotional service of the Lord. One should not neglect to understand fully how great Krishna is. For by knowing the greatness of Krishna, one will be able to be fixed in sincere devotional service. This is an important point. Sort of a counterpoint to the point I made earlier about the primacy of the intimate relationship with God before recognition of God's opulence, right? So back to the example of the rich man, before you can get to know the rich man, you have to realize, who he is. You have to walk around his garden and say, oh my God, this person must have done something important. Or, we hope these things are rich people, right? Oftentimes they haven't done anything important, and what they have done is very bad. But but consider this is a philanthropist, like a holy person. Assuming this rich man is a nice ethical man who pays his workers, it does all these things. But you have to sort of go through some levels to get to him. You can't just walk into the Vatican and say, I would like to see the Pope today. Right? Like St. Francis, that's what he did with his little ragtag bunch of, when he formed his monastic, he went with 6 people. I'd like to see the Pope. No, you can't see the Pope. You had to go through, various gates in order to gain an audience. And similarly, there's various doors that one walks through in the practice of bhakti, not leaving anything behind, but just one comes progressively to this point of intimate devotional service. This is what we're talking about in our classes on Wednesdays, is what is the concrete process of bhakti, coming from a conditioned state into a state of prema, into a state of total, overwhelming, unconditional, other-centered love, which is the goal of bhakti yoga. That is enlightenment in the bhakti yoga context. And so they say, right? And so they say this relationship, this intimate relationship with Krishna, is described in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, which is where all of this is leading up. Is the full revelation of God is given in the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, and then further fulfilled in the life, pastimes, and precepts of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But there's a reason. But even before you get to the 10th canto, before you get to Krishna in Braj, you have to read through 9 whole cantos of the Bhagavatam. And even before that, many people in the tradition says you should read Bhagavad Gita. Right? Prabhupada once said that Bhagavad Gita is the undergraduate study of spiritual life. This is your bachelor's degree in Krishna consciousness. For a master's degree, or a special certification, or the full, picture, take you to the Bhagavatam, because the conclusion that the Bhagavad Gita offers is sarvadharman prityaja, surrender to God. And how do we get to surrender to God? How do we get to sarvadharman prityaja in the 18th chapter? We go through chapters 1 through 17. Right? It systematically reveals these things. And this is the point where the Bhagavatam starts. Right? So Gita presents karma yoga, that's not the full thing, right? Presents Raja Yoga, Jnana Yoga, not yet the full thing. And then it presents Bhakti Yoga, which is, according to the text, the culmination of all of the things. And the second half of the Gita, as well as the first 9 cantos of the Bhagavatam, is a big explanation of how to do the thing, right? How to follow up on this revelation of the divine. And one of these steps is recognizing that divine everywhere. One of the members I'm also a member of a Christian church group, and one of them says talking about that verse in the Psalms. Like those of us who grew up with a Christian conception of hell, right? It's like hell is separation from God, as if such a thing could exist, right? But in the Psalms, David says, even if I make my bed in the depths of Sheol, in the depths of hell, you're there, right? And so one thing our pastor said, was God would never give you that much privacy, even in hell. He's with you always. We never have privacy, right? And so what can we do but give up all things to God, right? It's a knowledge that leads to this transformation. But the problem is we don't see the knowledge. And so resting in the knowledge that leads to transformation is the work of spiritual practice. That is what we're trying to do with our japa, with our kirtan, with our meditation, with everything we're doing. And that form of the deity on our altar that we're worshiping, wherever we worship, however we worship, whatever ishta we have, we're supposed to go out and see that form, that same form that I worship in this box over here that you see covered with a curtain. That form of Kali or Krishna or Ramakrishna. It's the same form I see out here, just in a different expression. This is the key to enlightenment. This is a highlighter verse. Very famous verse. Aham sarvasya prabhavo mata sarvam pravartate. Iti matva bhajante mam Buddha bhava samanditaha. I am the source of all the spiritual and the material worlds. Everything emanates from me. The wise, those with buddhi, with this, remember one of the first names that Krishna gives to this yoga practice is buddhi yoga, yoga of intelligence. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service. Bhajante, literally, who worship me with all of their hearts. Bhajante basically means sharing or engaging with love. Bhakti means loving exchange. This is what we're talking about. Devotional service, wherever Prabhupada says devotional service, loving exchange is an equally valid translation. I think it gives it a little perspective. Let's get into this purport. A learned scholar who has studied the Vedas perfectly and has information from authorities like Lord Chaitanya and who knows how to apply these teachings can understand that Krishna is the origin of everything in both the material and spiritual worlds. And because he knows this, perfectly, he becomes firmly fixed in the devotional service of the Supreme Lord. He cannot be deviated by any other nonsensical commentaries or by fools. Prabhupada was being very bombastic here. All Vedic literature agrees that Krishna is the source of Brahma, Shiva, and all the other demigods. We may not believe according to this, right? There are other Vedas that say other things, right? But Prabhupada is pointing to specific Vedas that are important for his tradition. In the Atharva Veda, Gopal Tapani Upanishad 124, it is said, it was Krishna who in the beginning instructed Brahma in Vedic knowledge and who disseminated Vedic knowledge in the past. Then again, in the Narayana Upanishad, it says, then the Supreme Personality of Godhead decided to create the living entities. From Narayana, Brahma is born. From Narayana, the patriarchs are born. From Narayana, Indra is born. From Narayana, the 8 Vasus are born. From Narayana, the 11 Rudras are born. From Narayana, the 12 Adityas are born, the planets, all the planets, the 9 planets plus Rahu and Ketu and plus something else. And so he gives all of these verses saying that Krishna is this ultimate authority. And why did the patriarchs keep being brought up? Why do the patriarchs matter so much? If you recall, our story about the Mahabharata, there's so much made about caste, right? So much made about what family you come from, what lineage you come from. That's Arjuna's dilemma. He's torn between his duty to his, brothers and to himself and to this family that's fighting against him. But Krishna is saying, I am the real source of everything. I'm your real dad. Krishna is saying, essentially. I'm your real husband, also, is what Krishna says to the gopis, right? In the 10th canto of the Bhagavad, he's saying, no, he doesn't say it. The gopis say that to him, right? He says, when Krishna is playing coy, he says, oh, go back to your husband. The gopis are like, you are the husband of all the living entities, right? We talked about that in our Nisha's Bhakti Sutra class. I think you can find that on the Vimeo. He brought me on to talk about the Gopi Lila, very, very esoteric pastime. The wise who perfectly know this engage in my devotional service and worship me with all their hearts. Another highlighter verse, another banger. Much chitta madgata prana Odayanta parasparam Hatha yantas chamam nityam tushanti cha ramanti cha. The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me, and their lives are fully devoted to my service. Mat gata prana, I am their life breath. My service is their life breath, he says. They derive great satisfaction. Tushanti, they are satisfied, and ramanti, they enjoy transcendental bliss. So it's not just these two levels on those who engage in bhajan, those who engage in bhakti. They're on two levels. They are satisfied, right? They come up. Not only are they, because in spiritual life, if we're honest with ourselves, A lot of the time, what we're not looking for is enlightenment. What we're not looking for enlightenment. We may say we're looking for enlightenment. We may think we're looking for enlightenment, but the bottom line is, at least starting out, a lot of us are looking for satisfaction. A lot of us are looking for just relief from the pains and the pangs of the material energy. And this is not a bad desire, right? This is the desire that drives us to spiritual life. That's one of the kinds of people Krishna says, I believe in the last chapter, that come to him as someone who's in distress, someone who's frustrated with the material world. The many verses that say that a prerequisite for spiritual life is some level of frustration with the material world and some indication that it cannot satisfy. Tushyanti means that material hankering is satisfied. So it's like you've come to negative numbers up to 0, right? But there's a divine reality above that. And so this is where the Ramanti means bliss, ecstasy. So what's beyond satisfaction is bliss. And this is the realm of bhakti. Sat and chit you can have without a personal relationship with God, but ananda, I don't know, not so much. A form of ananda maybe, but ananda in its fullest term, I believe, is a dynamic thing. This is why we have the play of Shiva and Shakti that creates the bhakti rasa, right? The taste of divine relationships that we seek out in bhakti yoga, that we're cultivating in bhakti yoga. By enlightening each other and conversing about tushyantita ramanticha, this is also the barometer for any spiritual practice. People are like, oh, what's my path? What's my this? What's my that? Is it making you satisfied or is it making you happy? Right? Is it making you a better person? Is it making you more connected with everything? There was a story that my Guruji tells about. He used to go to the Laguna Beach before there was a Kali Mandir, before there was all the stuff that my Guruji is involved with now. He was a young college student, and he was going to the Hare Krishna Sunday Feast program. And he would always take the bus from Berkeley to Laguna Beach, and he had to leave early before the feast. So he catch most of the lecture and the kirtan, but he had to leave early before he got the prasad. But he would go anyway, right? And there was a Christian minister who came to have a discussion, right? A discussion, right? We know some of us I know have been in these discussions, right? And it was this kind of thing where, he's already decided how he feels about our religion, right? And so he was getting really heated, really angry about hell and judgment, and like you need to pay for sins, and it's like it's not a sacrifice. You chant Hare Krishna, but that's not a sacrifice for sin. Like I've been told this before. Like someone's gotta die, like, sins. Like, there's a fixation. Someone's gotta die, like, and I can talk about my whole take on Christianity and the other because I love Jesus and I love that tradition, but but so in response, I think it was, I don't know if it was Badahari Prabhu, although Badahari Prabhu I believe was president at the time, but it was some well-known devotee who's down there, and he flips open the Gita and it opens to this passage. This red-faced guy, he's like, "You're going to hell," and it's like, "The thoughts of my pure devotees dwell in me. Their lives are fully devoted to my service. They derive great satisfaction and great bliss from always enlightening each other and conversing about me." And what the devotee says to this preacher, and he essentially says, "You're having the wrong symptoms." Right? It's always, when we do our Harinam chanting, our Hare Krishna chanting in the streets, at the football game, wherever, it's always us and like the preacher saying like, "You're going to hell because of how you're dressed, or if you're gay or trans." And it's like, which religion would you rather be a part of? Like, honestly, I'm going with the happy dancing people who are passing out cookies, right? So the people who want to spread joy, the people who want to spread happiness. There's back to the Bible. I'm full of Bible examples today. But St. Paul says that the barometer of what Jesus says they shall know a tree by its fruit. Right. So what is it doing for a person when it's practiced and implemented sincerely? And Paul elaborates on what these fruits are. He gives his commentary, right, as love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Which is a list that is almost verbatim repeated by Krishna later in this book, right? So, very important verse. To those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give them the understanding by which they can come to me. To show them special mercy, I, dwelling in their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. Okay, this is a great story. When Lord Chaitanya was in Benares promulgating the chanting of Hare Krishna, 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, thousands of people were following him. So Lord Chaitanya is on his tour of India, his big tour of India. He's walking all the way from Puri to South India, all the way to Vrindavan, all the way back around. The thousands of people are following. He's going on chanting Hare Krishna, spreading the chanting of the holy name. Prakashananda Saraswati, a very influential and learned scholar in Benares at the time, derided Lord Chaitanya for being a sentimentalist. Sometimes Mayavadi philosophers criticize the devotees because they think most of the devotees are in the darkest of ignorance and are philosophically naive sentimentalists. Actually, this is not a fact. There are very, very learned scholars who have put forward a philosophy of devotion. But even a devotee does not take advantage of their literatures or of the spiritual master. If he is sincere in his devotional service, he will be helped by Krishna himself within his heart. So the sincere devotees engaged in Krishna consciousness cannot be without knowledge. The only qualification is that one carry out devotional service in full Krishna consciousness. The Mayavadi philosophers think that without discriminating, one cannot have pure knowledge. For them, this answer is given by the Supreme Lord. Those who are engaged in pure devotional service, even though they will be without sufficient education, and even without sufficient knowledge of the Vedic principles, are still helped by the Supreme God, as stated in this verse. Love is all you need, is what that's basically saying. So these Mayavadi part of what Mayavad is, right, is basically saying, like, one of the reasons why Mayavad is a doctrine is not appealing to Vaishnavas and is at worst anathema to Vaishnavas, is that this doctrine that, like, the form of God is an illusion and the goal of God is to, just go beyond devotion and merge into the supreme everything. It says devotion isn't enough, right? Devotion is not a complete upaya. Devotion is not a complete process. When clearly stated by the scripture, it says both jnana and bhakti are complete processes, right, for their respective attainments, right? So in either school, there's a hierarchy of which attainment is higher. And in our tradition, where we hold both of these things, at the same time, it depends on the practitioner, right? I am a much more, as we could say, classically dualistically devotional type person, whereas Nish, I'm assuming, from everything I've heard from him, is a more non-dualist person, right? And so we can look at God in both of these ways. We are just looking at it from one special standpoint. That's referring to. So Krishna says, in this project of Bhakti Yoga, you are not the primary agent, right? In jnana, it's all about the self, discriminating between the real and the unreal, going within. But Krishna is saying that I initiate this process of devotional service. It's me who lights the lamp within their hearts and makes them realize all of this. Which is very, very in keeping with Sri Ramakrishna's take on bhakti. Over and over again, Sri Ramakrishna says that I do not do anything. I am the machine. You are the operator, O mother. And so this bhakti yoga, even though it may feel like we are, it's designed, and we may feel this. It's like, oh, we feel as if Krishna's meeting us halfway. Like, well, I'm doing half of my, my works of my puja, my sadhana, my this, my that. And Krishna is meeting me halfway, doing the other 50%, give me grace, right? When actually, and it feels like that, and it's meant to feel like that, right? It's meant to be like, okay, I have a part, I have something to give, I have something to approach with. What else are we going to do, right? If we're going to do something with our spiritual part, what are we going to do, right? But in reality, Krishna is doing 100% of this. Maybe he gives us free will to be a tiny like, little bit, but even this strength we have to carry out devotional service is but by the energies of God and the grace of the Guru. This is where these things come from. And so it's important that in our bhakti practice we always remain humble, right? That we pray to remain in the work that is being done on our hearts through Krishna, through Guru Varga, the Guru instructions, right? This is an important, and although self-effort is very important, it's equally important. We understand our self-effort in the light of the grace that allows us to, and when we see our self-effort in the light of grace, it sweetens it. It doesn't become like a dry thing where it's like, okay, I have to do this, I have to give this offering, I have to do this. It's I get to give this offering. Krishna is offering me an opportunity to offer flowers directly to his lotus feet, in his Murti form, in his form in the mind. We should take every opportunity to serve in that way if we are given that opportunity. God is letting us make desserts for him and is giving us back to him on the plate of prasad, right? That's an extraordinary thing that I feel like we take for granted because we do have such a clear philosophy and such a we do have such a high thing, you know, as people who have been exposed to Bhagavad Gita, to this kind of literature. So Arjuna responds, affirming this. He says, "You are the supreme personality of Godhead, the ultimate abode, the purest, the absolute truth. You are eternal, transcendental, original person, the unborn, the greatest. All the great sages such as Narada, Asita, Devala, and Vyasa confirm this truth about you. And now you yourself are declaring it to me. O Krishna, I totally accept as truth all that you have told me. Neither the demigods nor the demons, O Lord, can understand your personality. Indeed, you alone know yourself by your own internal potency, your own maya, your own shakti. O Supreme Person, origin of all, Lord of all beings, God of gods, Lord of the universe." Let's see what is in this purport. All right, we'll just keep going. "Please tell me in detail of your divine opulences by which you pervade all worlds. O Krishna, O Supreme Mystic, how shall I constantly think of you? How shall I know you? In what various forms are you to be remembered, O Supreme Personality of Godhead? O Janardana, again, please describe to me in detail the mystic power of your opulences. I am never satiated in hearing about you, for the more I hear, the more I want to taste the nectar of your words." If like one poem says, if the gopis, you know, have these great lines of like, the creator only gave me one mouth to sing the glories of Krishna. How foolish he must be. The creator Brahma gave me eyes that blink. And therefore, when we blink, we have to be deprived of the vision of Krishna for 1 second, right? Very powerful. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, "Yes, I will tell you of my splendorous manifestations, but only of those which are prominent, O Arjuna, for my opulence is limitless." He says, I'll give you the highlights, right? "I am the super soul, O Arjuna, seated in the heart of living entities. I am the beginning, the middle, and the end. Aham atma guda kesha sarvabhutashaya stita. Sarvabhutas Ashayastita, I am established in all beings. Aham adishchamadyam cha bhutanam anta eva. The beginning, I'm the middle, I am the end. We talked a little bit about this already. Of the Adityas, I am Vishnu. Of the lights, I am the radiant sun. Of the Maruts, I am Marichi. And of the stars, I am the moon. This is the 12 Adityas, of which there are 12 Adityas, of which Krishna is the principal. Adityas are planetary deities. And in some astrological texts, Vishnu is considered one of these. It's connected with Surya Narayan, like this concept of the sun worshipped as Narayan, right? This is an aspect of Hindu tradition. All the luminaries shining in the sky, the sun is chief. And in the Brahma Samhita, the sun is accepted as the glowing eye of the Supreme Lord. There are 50 varieties of wind blowing in space, and of these winds, the controlling deity, Marichi, represents Krishna. Among the stars, the moon is the most prominent at night, and therefore the moon represents Krishna. It appears from this verse that the moon is one of the stars. Therefore, the stars that twinkle in the sky also reflect the light of the sun. The theory that there are many suns within the universe is not accepted by the Vedic literature. Okay, so Prabhupada is not giving a scientific understanding here. But the poetic understanding, the literary understanding, it's the feeling that I'm separate, doing devotional work for God, part of God's play or dance. Absolutely. I would say that the goal of bhakti yoga is to enter into the play of God. Like, we're used to thinking about Leela as this Leela of God's play here on earth. And in terms of, and that is what the term means in more of a Shaiva Shakta context. In more of a non-dualistic context, is God's play is the creation of the material world, and that is there. But what Leela means in a Vaishnava context is the eternal pastimes of God that go on in the spiritual world, that go on in heaven, right? We don't like to talk about heaven, right? It's not an exact equivalent, right? But in Vaikuntha, in Goloka, in the spiritual world, God is dancing all the time. God is playing all the time. And all the dancing, all of the playing, all of the divine intimacy, that comes under the heading of devotional service. And that service, and up there, you know, participating in those activities up there, like if you go to the spiritual world, they're not doing japa, right? They're not doing, they might be doing kirtan, right? Because kirtan's fun, right? But they're wrestling with Krishna. They're cooking food for Krishna. They're dressing clothes for Balaram and Radharani and Krishna, and serving Mother Yashoda, and playing with the cows, and grazing with them in the grass, and climbing up Mount Govardhan. They're doing all these sort of things. And there's a direct line from those things in the spiritual world, and that line is our sadhana, our japa, our kirtan, our mantra meditation, our study of scripture. This is our lifeline into Krishna's divine realm of Leela, divine realm of play. And so this is what is meant. Entering into God's dance in this tradition. All right, I think we are going to stop here. We did a lot of talking today. We didn't get through the whole, let me see what time it is. It's 3:56. What we're gonna do is we're gonna finish up this chapter on Wednesday before our class on the Nectar of Instruction. And we are going to leave off for now. And we'll continue this discussion on Wednesday night. I'm going in circles a bit here. What was I going to announce? Yeah, in the Wednesday sessions, speaking of this sadhana, we are in the midst of a series on the 10 offenses to the holy name. What mistakes in the mind should be guarded against when chanting japa. So stay tuned for that. I will be uploading that video later today, most likely. So until then, I make my pronouns to you. Om Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. Hare Krishna.